welcome back to Sinews of War. In the previous episode we saw the conclusion of a decisive battle in India against the Mughals, where Costa lost most of his army but won the battle. After that we also made peace with the Maratha Confederacy, meaning we can now ease off in India and perhaps have an easier time of it. Back in Europe I made an assault against the Russians at Riga under General Verbiers. There was a nice easy set of glitches that made it hard for both us and them, but generally more for them as the enemy sacrificed their units to us, so no problems there. Then the now main force in India under De Beers advanced up to Hindustan, the victory province that we need to take to basically finish up in India. But behind the lines there was still a small Mughal army, so I scraped together a bunch of scrappy forces to go and take them on. Time to put your money where your mouth is, Mr. Cortland. There are enough heathens here to keep the entire church busy for a few centuries. It will be dealt with presently, but only when your talk becomes manifest and we destroy the Ottoman armies. Their loss will make the appeal of their cults evaporate under God's gaze. Sounds marvellous, but I'm afraid to say you might have to make a prayer to the God of guns and do this one by yourself. Your jokes may very well be taken as blasphemes, sir. You should watch your tongue. Sorry, but I can't turn my eyes down that far. See, that was a joke. What I said before was simply information. I am to return to Europe with my army. If you received orders, then why not I? I didn't say ordered. Look, my good fellow, you're the type of person who likes to believe he understands the world, to think that the world runs by the rules you have internally decided upon, along with your like-minded chums. But in truth, very few leaders appreciate how the world really works, how people really work. No surprise, as most of them do not interact with the people they rule at all. I, on the other hand, understand both the will of the people and that of the godliest of kings, and I find neither binding to me, and neither to be in step with each other. What on earth are you talking about? Don't worry yourself, Mr. Cortland. I am walking a path that started long before you joined me, and one that will make sense to all once done. All you need to know is I'm leaving, and will not be returning, even if the man in the sky himself starts dragging me back by my heels. Do you see why everyone calls you a madman in the States General? Yes, means that I'm right. They'll call me something else if I ask them politely. So we're going to be getting things started with that attack on the Mughal army coming in from all sides. Their army just going to be wandering about in the centre of the field here. Some of them actually garrisoning themselves into those walls. They intend to be on the defensive, but you can see here cavalry coming in right next to their deployment zone and going to be able to cause some chaos, especially for this archer unit, which finds itself suddenly attacked from behind by these cav. It's going to skirmish away though, so it is going to prolong its life in that fashion and make sure we don't kill them too quickly. But they can't get back to the rest of their army. They're really isolated, so our cav are going to catch them and start cutting them down with ease. Now there are other units nearby that could come and support, but the rest of their army is just continuing to get into their formation. Only one unit of archers nearby was really a threat, so I ordered my cav to run through that first unit of archers to try and get that second one into melee, and that seemed to work just fine. So now we can engage both the units of archers at once with all of these cavalry, and that's going to be absolutely fine. We're going to be cutting them down. We can expect to destroy both of those units of archers with pretty much no loss to our own cav, so that is going to be nice. But I had some trouble with a different unit of archers, one that moved up to engage the infantry that were coming onto the field on the enemy's flank. You can see here I'd positioned my men in a place where I thought they'd be able to shoot the archers, but not taking into account that archers have longer range than my line infantry. So we are going to have to just take those arrows, and I need to move forward to get closer before we fire. And I just want to focus on how much damage this one unit of archers actually does to the line with its bombardment of arrows. So already taking casualties as we get into position. You can see men dropping all over the place as arrows just continually rain down on our ranks. We've seen before that archers, when controlled by the AI at least, are extremely powerful. I believe they get a large bonus to their accuracy when under AI command. So my men still preparing to fire back at the enemy. Look at the losses we've taken as my men shuffle around to try and reform because of the losses. Finally they're ready to fire. They're still not going to do it though. They've already lost lost more than a quarter of their unit to this archer fire. Finally, they are actually going to get a volley off, but the damage done to the archers is a minimal, firing at quite long range as well. So it seems that in a line battle, line infantry just cannot beat a regiment of archers. Meanwhile, the rest of the fight just isn't happening, both sides just watching each other. I don't want to rush uphill into the enemy's melee lines, but eventually I crept forwards enough to be able to shoot up the hill towards the enemy, and that's going to be just fine for me. Bad line of sight, but going to inflict a bit of damage and at least tempt the enemy to do something. Here we can see their heavy swordsmen on the move. In the background there, you can see how I dealt with those archers in the end, just attacked them with like 5 units of cavalry, so that got rid of them. But their swordsmen are now going to start making their attack towards my main line. Luckily for me, in pretty much all cases, the swordsmen just ran around for a bit first, doing zigzaggy patterns, allowing me to get lots of extra volleys off on the enemy, so we can do a bit of damage before they engage, which is great. But ultimately they do have a nice downhill charge into my ranks, taking a point blank range volley there, which didn't really do anything, but in they go. Unfortunately for the enemy, we're going to have them totally surrounded with cav, and now that their main bodies of infantry are committed to fighting, the isolated ones left behind, like their archers and musketeers, can just be raided by my cav. And here we see some cuirassiers coming in for a classic hammer and anvil strike on this unit of swordsmen. Alexander the Great would be very fond of that particular move, and it works just as well now as it did then. The exact same thing happening on the other side with the native Indian lancers making the strike. So the enemy's melee attacks on the ends of my line are completely destroyed, and very rapidly I just charged everything into the center of the battlefield, and the whole thing was swamped by my cavalry in particular. You can see cavalry absolutely everywhere. I had so much cav in this battle for some reason. We were able to just absolutely annihilate the enemy in a quick melee, with my infantry getting in there as well. So it's a win. We're going to look at the results on the campaign map. Actually a little bit worse than the ones there, because it didn't take into account the losses among my reinforcement army, but still killing about 10 times as many as we lost. So an absolutely superb result, especially for what was technically a siege assault. And we get a settlement out of that as well. So the forces after that battle are going to need to be redistributed. These men here are supposed to be going to join Costa's army once it gets back from eastern India, so they'll wander over there. And these 2 units of cav are going to go near one of my very undefended settlements, just to make sure that the Mughal army down to the southwest, just off camera actually, doesn't go and attack them. We'll also not tax this settlement because it's worth nothing and it's unhappy. But with that capture, our territory in India is now looking very stable indeed. The number of avoidable deaths has been far too high. The men, it seems, are unfamiliar with an attack by traditional projectiles. Very large numbers retired from the line with arrow wounds, but scarce few did the correct thing by leaving the arrow in the wound until they reached camp. Those desperate to remove it quickly realized that the open wound they created was far more deadly than a sliver of metal in their flesh. Even those who made it to me alive were not spared the wrath of nature. Disease takes life and limb throughout my hospital. The worst thing is the guilt I feel. Perhaps I should have predicted the enemy would employ such tactics and instructed my battlefield orderlies accordingly. 100 men or more would still live today. Moving on into the Ottoman turn, they obviously steal my technology as usual, and then they start sending forces moving southeast out of Anatolia, looking like they might actually now threaten Damascus or Jerusalem, so we need to keep an eye on that. The Russians not making many offensive moves, lots of forces moving around, a small group moving into our territory in Riga, and one of their fleets comes to blockade a Syrian port, not going to make a huge amount of difference either, so that's all fine. They do have a force that looked like it was going to besiege Ukraine, but actually called that off the last second and just sat in one of my farms. The Maratha come to me with an absolutely outrageous deal. They want me to give them a region in India, and in exchange they'll let me walk through it, essentially. They'll give me military access, which is not helpful at all. I just thought it was fun how they gave me such an unsuitable offer. Now the Mughals are going to be making a move here at the siege in Hindustan. They want to sally out against De Beers, bringing all of those archers and swordsmen. So an interesting army, moderately powerful. We need to not let it engage us at range because of those archers, and we want to not let it engage us close because of those swordsmen, so gonna have to work something out here. We've got a nice versatile force with a gigantic cavalry advantage, which of course against archers could come in extremely useful. So as the battle gets going, I'm going to set up on the edge of the map, trying to keep my distance from the enemy's fortifications in the center. The enemy, curiously, actually didn't make an attack on me right away. Inside the fort, many of them just walking in slow motion and glitching around the place, as you might expect. What they're actually trying to do is get behind their fort to form up at the back of the map as far away from me as they can. They are sallying against me, so they do have to attack, but they just wanted to take their time about it, basically. Eventually, you can see they're forming some semblance of an army here at the back, with a little exception. One unit of archers decided to detach off and come forward for a little bit of scouting. They are going to encounter a problem very rapidly though, which is that one isolated unit of archers is weak against everything, including this massive brigade of lancers that's about to hit them. So they get defeated very easily when I decide to break my own formation to come all the way over here with these native Indian lancers slamming into the enemy, and their losses are going to be absolutely enormous here. You can look very carefully on the tooltip and see the numbers dropping. Their morale not going to hold out either, so they lose half their men in a couple of seconds. That routs the unit, and now as they attempt to escape, they are going to lose pretty much all of the other half. In summary, they lost about 250 men over the course of just a few seconds, an absolutely outrageously favourable engagement for us. And now we'll just let the shattered survivors get away. Our units will move back to the line to rest, ready for the main fight, which after a long time looked like it might actually going to be getting started. They came at us in a very loose and odd formation after spending all that time forming up. It was all wasted apparently. You can see here a unit of archers super exposed on their left flank, going to be a nice target for all of my company cavalry who are going to emerge from behind that ridge to make an attack. So the lancers have had their fun. It's time for the sword cavalry to go in, and they're going to have pretty much the exact same effect. Those archers trying to escape, but as you might guess, not going to work, and there's going to be plenty more targets for my cav to chase after that. Another unit of archers threw away its ranged advantage and came in close to my line, took some volleys and shattered because of that gunfire, so that was very nice. That's exactly what I need the enemy to do, very kind of them. On the other flank, the enemy making another curious strike. They seem to be trying to go around my line with a flank attack. The problem for them is that they're making this flanking move within range of my guns, so their archers are again getting cut down for free here. We've got some line infantry and some sepoys, basically a slightly worse version of line infantry. We're going to be able to target them the whole time during this move, so as you might imagine, that is not going to work out very well for them. In the centre, some of the fight's starting. My guys just gunning down some archers who are shattering instantly. Their swordsmen coming in though, so that's going to be the real worry. The upside to that, of course, though, is that it leaves all of their archers totally exposed to cavalry attacks, which is exactly what we needed for this battle. So now the lance is going to go back into action, just finding and destroying archer units wherever they can, whilst the enemy's melee infantry just dilly-dallying in front of the line, even routing as they take fire. This unit here actually isn't routing, it's just acting like it is, rushing away from the line. Then they have second thoughts and decide they are going to make an attack, but they've already spent too much time sitting in front of that gunfire and actually rout because of it, and we are not going to let them get away with it. We're going to try and hunt down all of the sword units and shatter them so that they don't come back, and that's going to be easy enough because their route actually went right across the face of our lines. It was easy to strike them. Even De Beers going out with his staff to join the hunt as we just annihilate those routing units. So the rest of the line left behind doesn't have all that much to do. We've got some more cavalry action going on the other flank, where I decided to test how the company cav would do against the enemy's heavy infantry, and they seem to do quite well. The charge bonus means we absolutely destroy a massive portion of their unit on the attack. Going to be attacking from both sides as well to add to the fun, and then in melee the enemy don't seem to do all that well either, so we are going to be able to take them down. They have higher morale than archers, so they're harder to rout with cavalry attacks, but still going to do the job eventually. Now, one of their melee units did eventually manage to charge into my line whilst my line was reloading, so now the enemy are going to gain a tiny local advantage because they'll start to slaughter my men in this melee. But it was around this point that I realized these men, who I've been calling swordsmen, actually don't even have swords. They actually just have a buckler and are otherwise punching my men. So this fist and buckler approach, perhaps not as effective as using a traditional weapon. My men seem to hold the line okay, and now my lines on either side will fold around so that we can shoot into the side of the blob of enemy melee infantry, and pretty soon that unit is going to be completely annihilated because of that. Should have brought swords maybe next time. A little bit of a main fight happening in the centre as the enemy's archers finally form up to do what they should have done the whole time, just firing at me at range. They are actually in my range though, so you can see I'm firing back, and that return fire routs the enemy before our casualties rack up too much, although they were happening very quickly there. Actually lost like 20% of a unit in a few seconds. De Beer is out there in the centre, joining my cavalry as we hunt around, just taking out all of these scattered enemy units, shattering everything we can, trying to bring this fight to an end without having to bother micromanaging the infantry, and that's going to work pretty much fine with so much cav. The battle comes to an end with another superb result, killing more than 10 times the amount we lost, absolutely destroying the enemy's forces. And we can see here on the individual unit stats that one unit of cav almost got 100-to-1 trade ratio losses to kills, absolutely insane. Other units of cav, the lancers, they're doing very good as well. So overall, a superb and extremely decisive victory that overall means a victory for our campaign in India. What fools. They come to die to fulfill a request that God has given them, but what came of it? This slaughter was not the work of the Lord. It is the devil that spoke to these peasants, drove them mad with the desire to sacrifice all for nothing. Hard to even conceive of how idiotic one has to be to not notice that. All we can hope is that those we killed today were those the land will miss the least. As company assets go, the rest of the population might be a cut above the rest. That's our job now then, make something of this huge new world we have conquered. Not that we'll be out of a job here. I think there will be plenty of battles to come, even if they aren't against other states. But for now, there are unlimited spoils to enjoy. Let's to the city. So now that we're into the next turn, we get some bad news coming up. There's been a death by natural causes, and it has afflicted Gerard Calember, the finest of our admirals, and certainly the finest officer of the West India Company, possibly eclipsed only by General Van Nassau. We actually can't see where he is because he was in the middle of the Atlantic, far out to sea when he passed away, which perhaps is how he would have liked best to go. But we can't mourn for too long. There's plenty of war still to come, and right now I'm considering what to do with this scrappy army that I brought up to stop Russia from coming down into the Balkans through Eastern Europe, but they didn't really try to do that in the end, so instead I'm going to use it to go on the offensive to try and retake the territory that Russia stole from us, that we stole from Poland, Lithuania, so Belarus and Lithuania basically, and we'll see what they can do. Next up, it's time to finish off the garrison here in Hindustan. Pretty much nothing for them to use against us, so they were annihilated, with more handy traits and level ups coming to De Beer, so that is very nice. And more importantly, we have now captured the victory region that we needed here in India. We still have to take Goa as well, owned by our allies, the Portuguese, but that should be a much easier affair. The purpose of our war with the Maratha Confederacy and the Mughals has now been achieved. It's going to be a bit of a struggle to keep it, so that's the only last thing to remember. Public order absolutely abysmal, so we're going to repair up all the buildings and see what that does, but there's a decent chance we're going to face rebellion here with this massive population, all of which doesn't have our religion. There's clamour for reform from schools and a huge resistance to occupation because they are the capital of the Mughal Empire. Similar deal there for Gaiden in the Crimea, who's still stuck there trying to put down public opposition to us. But further south there is some action to be had, moving this reserve army up nearby the Ottoman army that's currently just sitting in our port down there to the south, and now I wanted to move either Voss or Cordeland to go and support that army and take on the Ottoman force to annihilate it. We do need to keep in mind there's another Ottoman force down there to the southeast, nothing particularly powerful, but could take the settlement back if we're not careful here. So eventually Cordeland is convinced to go and face this army. There's a little bit of an annoyance here though, because the fact I have to go around my own army actually uses enough movement points that I can't now reach the Ottoman force, so we can't get that battle going right now, which is annoying. And Voss, although he's been left with the defense of the settlement, isn't going to actually put up a defense. He has got his own plans in mind, so he's going to be walking off back towards Istanbul right now. meaning we could face an attack by the Ottomans at Ankara in this turn if they can reach it, but of course Voss not particularly concerned by that, so he's going to go off on this mission. Also going to start repairing up a lot of the damage that's been done to the province now that things are starting to stabilise. We've got another Ottoman issue. This small army which has come down the coast is actually in a position to take Jerusalem, I've just noticed. We only have a couple of units garrisoned there and they'll probably be absolute trash, so we do need to try and do something about this. I discovered this random rake in Egypt which can go spy on the Ottomans for us. Now I've got this army at Damascus prepared to stop the Ottomans attacking from the east, which will do the job. And you can see here, first I was seeing if I could get the forces to run round and garrison Jerusalem so that it wasn't in danger. But eventually I realised, wait a minute, why don't we just go and defeat the army? It's right there. I don't know why I didn't think of that right away. So there we go, we've got rid of them. We inflict massive casualties in an easy auto-resolve and they move away. So now what I'm going to do is split this force. I want some of it to stay in Damascus just as a holding force, and the rest are going to move up to finish off that army. And the reason that I shouldn't send the whole thing is that the Ottoman army just there to the northwest now might come down and engage this force, in which case it will probably win against only a small army. So we want to make sure it's not too much of a loss, basically, if that was to happen. The only upside is it might distract them from going towards Ankara, so we'll just have to see what they do there. Now, switching over to the Americas, we're going to continue putting pressure on New Spain, moving down through Mexico to try and defeat that small army. There shouldn't be a problem. And at the same time, finally putting some money into building upgrades, which I haven't been doing for a really long time. Not for many, many turns have I done this, because I've been spending all my money on ship repairs, unit replenishments, building repairs and the like, and that's been draining my whole treasury every turn because we have so many giant wars going on all at the same time. I'm finally getting to the point when I can start to invest in these provinces, which will make me lots of money in the long run. Also going to set up for an attack on Panama and move some of these forces back to form a new reserve at Caracas. The situation in America looking very strong. News from the Fanfaron. Admiral Kellenberg has returned to the sea. I'm sure some of you realise this already, given the commotion in the town. He was a man not just of our company, but of the one who came before, a man who oversaw the construction of this very building decades ago, a man who on countless occasions made sure that any who would damage our shipping, the blood in our veins, was punished rightfully for halting the march of progress. A Dutchman through and through, not a single native officer. He was, my friends, an irreplaceable asset. I propose that, despite the early hour, we raise a toast to Kellenberg and his devils under sail. May God give him a hero's welcome, and us fair compensation for his loss. After the Ottomans are done stealing more of my tech, we see them move their army towards Ankara, but it can't reach it, so we're safe for now. The Russians also making lots of moves that might suggest an offensive, forces moving towards borders, and a raiding force that are taking some of my farms there near Riga, so we'll have to take them on. They're also stealing my tech, just like pretty much every other nation in the world at this point. But interestingly, they make a move towards Kiev, but are intercepted by my army. So I have the opportunity to fight this smaller force. I actually declined because I wanted to see if I could tempt them into coming and attacking the walls at Kiev, the fortifications that is, instead. And unfortunately they just ran away after realizing they were in trouble, so nothing came of that. There's my letter of demands from Hindustan. The nobles are ready to start a rebellion and the lower classes are definitely ready to rebel, so need to be ready for that. Now at sea, the fleet formerly led by Kellenberg has now arrived in West Africa, where I intended to try and secure some more trade nodes, but actually it seems some of my neutral and allied states have taken some of the trade nodes I was hoping to get, so only one is available for me to come and capture, which is a shame. If I'd come back earlier, I think there were 3 available that I could have taken, but we'll bring down this random new Spanish fleet that actually isn't trading at all, possibly because New Spain don't have any docks left, but anyway, sink that with ease. The enemy fleet was already damaged before the battle even started, so that made things extra easy. And now some of the trade ships down to the south there can come and take that trade node, getting a more efficient distribution, so we'll make more money from this theatre overall. Fantastic news. Did a bit of a look around to see what else I could do with the fleet, but really there's not much for it to do anywhere in the world, so I decided to send it back to the Americas. And in the Americas, we're going to continue our offensive against New Spain. This army stands and fights against a massively superior force, a terrible decision, and it's just wiped out by auto-resolve, now clearing the way for us to continue on to try and take that settlement there. And further south, we're going to be doing something similar, but the New Spanish have made a more clever move by actually moving one of their armies to garrison Panama there. The second army just just about out of movement range at the moment, so it can't quite come in to support this siege that I'm starting. You can see I'm just checking it here, but it can get close enough to reinforce, meaning if I attack them next turn it will be harder than attacking them now. So I try to get them to surrender, they accept, but then they actually don't leave, and the game just kind of freezes up and I can't click on anything anymore. So eventually, after playing around and reloading a save, we managed to get back to here, and we asked them to surrender again, and this time they actually do leave, which is fantastic. So we got rid of that army. It's possibly a shame not to defeat it, but I'm actually just not worried about it. I'd rather have the settlement for free and just move on quickly. We'll repair the place up, we're not going to tax it because it's not worth anything and it needs some more development, but New Spain under a lot of pressure now, losing territory fast. In India, we've just got one issue to clear up, where there's this little Mughal army sitting in our back line, so my reserve force goes to take it out, and in a couple of easy auto resolves we destroy that army. So now all of the threats to our territory are gone, meaning we're safe to start repairing up all of the damage that's been done by this war and finally start rejuvenating India with our massive wealth. Against the Ottomans, we need to do something against that army that's sneaking up to Ankara. You can see I recruited 3 militia last turn, but that may not be enough to stop a whole army. So we need to take out the army that Cordland is currently just staring at and standing right next to. So we've got 2 stacks to do it, shouldn't be too hard. And it turns out that army is actually really damaged. It has barely any troops in it, so I didn't need to send these 2 stacks here after all, so that's an annoying turn of events. But the good news is that both of my armies can make it back to the town or to reinforcement range of the town. Made the same mistake as earlier, where I walked around my own army, and that actually stops Cordland from getting back to the garrison, but the other army can get back to the garrison, meaning the Ottomans will now have no chance of retaking their more recent capital, so they should be screwed once we counterattack them next turn. Against the Russians, we're going to continue moving up to Belarus, where the enemy have abandoned their garrison recently. I think their force is hidden somewhere off to the west. We'll see if it reappears. Now, near St. Petersburg, there were also previously forces standing on my border who disappeared, so I was thinking maybe it's actually time for a counter-attack. I just didn't know what Russia had, so what I did was a classic move of sending a sloop to actually go and spy. First I moved out to the border just to see if anything would be revealed in hiding or something just there, but it turns out there was not much to look at. I will be stronger if I actually attack next turn because I'm replenishing right now, so I don't want to attack right now anyway, but thanks to the long distances I probably wouldn't be able to do that. So we find out there's actually 1.5 stacks of Russian troops up there, and that was the same place where last time we tried to take it we were surprised by 1.5 stacks and lost with Uwata's army, so going to be slightly hesitant to do that again. Instead going to move back to St. Petersburg. We will be able to make that attack if we have a little bit of support, because the Russian troops aren't all that good. We just need a few more men, and they may come in the form of Vermeer's army. First, he just needs to take out this random Russian raiding force. The balance bar here is surprisingly even despite our apparent company advantage, because the enemy's companies are bigger than mine by 50%, they're line infantry ones anyway, so they have a numerical advantage on us, but I don't think that's going to be really important. And this battle actually turned out to be moderately interesting for a completely unrelated reason, so we will take a little look at it next time. In just a few hundred years, most of the major ports and producers in India had come into the hands of the East India Company. In theory, the potential was huge. India had enough people and resources to outperform all of Europe if the most modern techniques and equipment were used. The company would need to invest huge amounts to bring the region up to speed, but once done, it would be an empire unto itself. The only rival it would have would be its historic rival, the West India Company, who stood a chance of achieving the same thing in the Americas if enough Europeans emigrated to increase the density of the population. In Europe itself, where merchant competition was stiff internally and externally, the same could not be said. Thanks for watching. We'll put our money to good use to start new golden ages in all of our new territory in the next episode of Sinews of War.